Ladies and gentlemen, guys, gals, non-binary pals, friends, writers, makers, doers, dreamers, pantsers, plotters, nacho enthusiasts, hoes, thoughts, wrestlers, wrestling fans, chair enthusiasts, root beer drinkers, root beer guzzlers, anybody who's had a snack today, people who have nice, comfy shoes, anybody who's really appreciated a good vacuum, like a nice appliance purchase, and most importantly, the comrades. Hello, hi, I'm John. How are you? How have you been? It's been a hot minute. Guess what I have today? It's workshop day, and there's an audience, and holy shit, we're going to do the job. So, hello, today, here, hi, for you. I have never before seen absolutely, well, unless you were one of the five people I tested this for this week, never before seen and shared methods and stuff for building a character. But we'll get there. We're going to start, though, kind of just with the basics. Who am I? I'm John. Hi, that's what I look like. I know it's weird. I've been doing this job since 1997. I started in traditional publishing in 1996 at a company called Bertelsmann, which is a giant octopus of a million different things. One of those tentacles you may know as Penguin Random House Publishing. Bertelsmann is sort of the big thing that controls the little things. I was there for a few months. It didn't go well. Surprising no one who knows me, but it didn't go well. And then when they no longer needed my services, when they no longer wanted me in their building, and I was kicked out for reasons that I have discussed elsewhere, I apprenticed under writing coach Sid Kruger from 1997 to 2006, just before he died. And I have been a writing coach for traditional publishing and freelance publishing ever since. I have to date worked with over 300 authors on over 700 manuscripts. More specific details on all of that stuff will be given in tomorrow's panel. That's right. We're doing some more stuff tomorrow too. But yeah, that's the basics. That's who I am. And today, well, here's what I got for you today. We have an absolutely easy, like actually easy system for building all kinds of characters. Doesn't matter your genre, doesn't matter your book, doesn't matter who you are or how often you've done this. My goal here for the next hour or a little bit less is to help you sort of build characters that are multidimensional, well organized, and can be plugged into whatever the hell story you have. And characters are everything. They are absolutely everything because as a pillar found, a foundational element of the story triangle, which is plot, world, and character, characters are everything. Without your characters, it doesn't matter what your plot is. Doesn't matter how creatively you've written your world. Doesn't matter what you've got going on or how imaginative or wild your plans for your book are. Without characters, your story is just a long ramble of stuff you made up. And characters are what we remember from stories. Any story you want to think of, you've probably thought about the characters who at the heart of it and at the core of it. So this matters. It's a big deal. So today I've got 5 components for you. 5 things that we're going to walk through in order to build. We're going to focus on main characters, protagonists, because that's probably the easiest way to sort of cover the most ground. But you're going to do this, and you can do this for your antagonists, your bad guys, your secondary characters, your love interests, your best friends, your quirky side characters, those, random people in the background, even the red shirts that you're going to kill off just to have a body count in your horror novel. We can build them too, though admittedly, you're not going to build them to the same degree because we're just going to kill them off. But 5 components to sort of form and develop everything we've got here in terms of character building. Here we go. We're going to start with item number 1, the high concept. Now, the high concept we can break down into English as what your character is, except we don't want to think about this in terms of like the job, because Just like you, real person, you watching this, you are not your job. Your job is a thing you do, but it is not the sum total of your existence. Your high concept is a summary of what your character is or who they are. For instance, if we had Denise, a firefighter, we wouldn't just go, Denise is a firefighter and stop there. We want to go that extra step. The extra step is something we're going to talk more about in the next panel tomorrow. But taking that extra step is a huge deal that helps us organize your idea beyond just that initial excited, enthusiastic single definition. So Denise is a firefighter who's always doing the right thing. One idea plus another. Go the extra step. Or maybe we don't want Denise, the firefighter, always doing the right thing from our romance novel. Maybe we want to do the fantasy warrior. So we have Galbraith, the only warrior who cares. What we're looking to do for our character is distill the essence down until we can talk about the character's potential. We can do that by asking questions like, who is this person? We want to call them James Kenneth Galbraith? Sure. Kenneth is a great middle name. Let's do it. What we want to do here is ask who this character is at their heart and soul. Who is their, is he an economist? It's entirely unintentional. I used a random name generator to give me an orc name. We want to ask who our character is at their heart and soul. And who would this character be if they had no limitation? If they were just them in their Maslow pyramid idealized structure, who are they? What would they do? What could they be if there was nothing in the way? The high concept is a somewhat idealistic view of things. There's the reason it's the first step because it gives us not only a sense of potential, but it also gives us a sense of boundary. We love boundaries. Boundaries are great for writing. Boundaries tell us what is from what isn't. Because if we say Denise is a firefighter who's always doing the right thing, we also then know that Denise is probably not a heart surgeon. She's probably not like a space adventurer. She's not a queen in a fantasy kingdom. She's a firefighter, always doing the right thing. Your high concept is there to sort of give you an immediate snapshot of a character's being, their essence. That high concept can be a phrase, it can be a word, it could be a sentence. More words are better than few words here. But the idea is we want to take our character, and I've got examples coming later where we kind of drill in and go, who is this person? Who are they? Whether they're human or not, whether they're in this genre or that genre, who are they? What can we do with them? This is going to give us the most potential and the most utility. That's your narrative term for the day. Utility is the ability to go from one idea to the next. We want potential and utility out of our high concept. Lead us somewhere, take us somewhere, give us a possible direction. That's step one. On we go to step two. I do want to point out, though, that your high concept also works for bad guys. You can do this for everybody, all of them, all the time. Any character, whether it's Kevin, the guy who pours the coffee, or whether it is our space pirate, or whether it is the lead of our romance novel. Everybody gets this. And you want to keep it open-ended. That's if there's a big sort of red flag problem, a most common issue with this is that people tend to make them very closed, like you're trying to perfect this idea. It's got to be perfect. It's got to be this thing. It's just a starting point. It's just a single place to like put a thing together, whomever they might be, wherever they are, however they are. We just have this sense of, oh, this is who they are at the moment. Over the course of the story, that might change. Over the course of the story, it might get developed. Over the course of the story, other stuff might happen. But by and large, it's a baseline and a snapshot that is more than just a definition based on an occupation. It's who this person is. Potential is your magic word. Aim for it. On to part two. Now, we just talked about this idealized big thing, this sort of hyper good, limitless concept. Now we're going to mess it up. Now we're going to just make it complicated. We're going to put dirt under the fingernails. We're going to talk about part number two called the trouble, which we can summarize as what's holding them back. This is the flaw at the heart of the character. So everybody's imperfect. You're imperfect. I'm imperfect. The lady sitting next to you is probably imperfect. The guy, your next door neighbor, imperfect. There is a flaw at the heart of every character. Every character, good guy, bad guy, love interest, whatever. That flaw sticks and influences and tints and torques the entirety of who that person is. Whether you are somebody who didn't get enough love as a child, so you're constantly seeking approval, your trouble would be constantly seeking approval. Or you've got a character who's, forever trying to go to the next horizon. They're constantly restless. That's also a trouble. What this flaw does is motivate the character no matter what they're doing. Some writing, some admittedly not great writing, will turn this trouble into the only arc of your story. It's not automatically wrong to do that. It's not the end of the world to do that. It is, however, not the best strategy in the world to do that because it will eventually put your story on some kind of rails and give you a sense of limitation, which you don't always want. And your trouble doesn't need to be automatically fixed over the course of this single story, even if you're just writing a one off story with no series plans or anything. Your trouble's just there. Your character is the way your character is. Now, there's a question in chat. What about flaws that arise from situations, such as being stuck in a crappy job or not being able to pursue a hobby? Well, that's more of a situational trouble, and that comes up, and that's a thing, but that's not necessarily the trouble at the heart of the character. It can be. If your story is limited in scope, it can be narrow like that. But I'm talking more conceptual and existential. But yeah, you can totally take a situational thing and make it a problem within the sake of the story early on in structure. Your first act problem is I've got to get off this planet because it sucks here and I keep looking out into the stars hoping for the future. That's more of a situational, arc for story as opposed to arc for character. Because once that character, like, sneaks onto the space shuttle and blasts off, well, then you've resolved that situational trouble. The trouble for a character and character development does not necessarily have to be solved over the course of the story. It is not always an easy thing with an easy solution. It shouldn't be. Because if it were an easy solution, the reader's going to question, well, why don't they just solve it? And then you end up in this sort of arms race with your reader where you are always trying to justify like why they can't immediately go solve the problem, which you don't really want to do. Then there's another question in chat. Do we want to try and stick with just one trouble, or is it ever wise to have multiple? That's an awesome question. Yeah, you can try. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having multiple. It can be good. However, too many, and I'm making air quotes on an audio thing, too many troubles can be paralyzing for story, can be paralyzing for opportunity, can be paralyzing to get your information across because your character's problems seem bigger and more intense than their possibilities. We start restricting and overwhelming the character and paralyzing the momentum of story if, well, here's this problem and here's this problem and here's that problem. The example I would give you for that is, have you ever talked to somebody, anybody, who's just the first thing they lead with is the 15 things wrong? I've got this problem and this problem, and then there's this, and then there's that, and then there's this, and then this, and then this, and then that. And it's just all bad stuff. Like your mom, sir. I'm terribly sorry. And the issue is, and just a lot of negative, and it's you just kind of sigh and feel defeated. We don't really necessarily want that kind of defeat to permeate off the page every time, all the time, because then nobody would read the book. There's another question over here. So if Galbraith is fighting in a swamp, but he has a fear of snakes, leaving the swamp doesn't solve his trouble. Yes, Karen, that is correct, because the trouble sort of is in his life. So he might have a fear of snakes. It's just that he doesn't encounter them because he left the swamp. But if we take that fear of snakes and bring it up later in the story, outside of, swamp A, we go to planet of the snakes B over here. Yeah, the trouble doesn't necessarily evaporate and disappear because the trouble maintains tension in the story. This is why you don't want to automatically high speed resolve the trouble, because if you just take the problems away from the character loses a little bit of tension. Isn't that my example with Denise? Isn't my example with Denise situational? In situational, it's her lot in life to suffer and struggle. It can be situational in terms of the situations I put Denise in. But if my trouble for Denise is it's her lot in life to suffer and struggle, then I, as the writer of Denise, will always know what to do in any situation. Oh, she's going to suffer and struggle. So no matter where I put Denise, whether it's she's got to go to make a difficult phone call, or whether she's got to, you know, deal with problem family members, I always know that Denise will suffer and struggle. So is the trouble a character's trauma, or is that too narrow a definition? I think it's a well, I think it's a little too narrow. I'm making little fingers. It's a little too narrow only because the word trauma has a really substantial social definition now. And people, especially people on the internet, tend to throw that thing around somewhat willy nilly. And um, it's it can be a trauma, but I'm also suggesting and advocating that not all troubles are traumatic. You don't always have to take the character there. It can just be a trouble. It can just be a dimension of their life that is not predicated on bad thing happened as child. Now we move forward. It can be fear of snakes, or inability to commit to something, which is not necessarily predicated on, like, oh, when I was 11, this terrible thing happened in the barn. You don't always have to drive it to trauma for it to be a trouble, if that makes sense. It's a good question, Ross. So our trouble is a motivator, but not necessarily our arc. It is just there driving us, or driving the character, I should say, as we need. If there's no trouble, then there's nothing beyond the superficial or situational moving the character forward. We want to get into the habit of holding our character back. If this isn't a demonstration of how creative you can be, so that, oh, look, my characters are flawless, they do everything the bestest. Because while the reader does want escapism, absolutely the reader wants escapism, we don't only want to be interested in perfect, unattainable, over the top escapism. There's a time and place for that, but it can't be everywhere. Flaws, like a trouble, help create a relatable bridge between your character and the reader's life, because you don't know your reader necessarily. You don't know what they're going through. You don't know what happened to them yesterday. You don't know what's going to happen to them tomorrow. You don't know why they're reading your book. Not your job. Not even a thing for you to worry about. But what you can do is always make sure that you're building a bridge between your characters in your world and that reader. They can read, they can feel like it's a real thing, feel like, oh, I get it. I understand what that's like. This writer is putting words to a thing that matters to me. Oh, they're speaking to me. They get me. I'm making air quotes again. That's what we're going for. That's what we're looking for. Do we always have to show the trouble in an obvious way, or can it manifest as the reason for their actions in the later parts of one story? We always have to show the trouble in an obvious way. No, you do not. There's no quiz at the end of your book, I presume. There's no sense of, like, what was the trouble on page 8? It can manifest through their actions over the course of the story. Absolutely. It can bubble up whenever. My fear of, constantly needing praise comes up in a lot of different ways over a lot of different situations, some good, some bad, some big, some small. It can percolate and pop in there whenever. That's kind of the whole point. It's a great question, Derek. What we want to do is take your high concept and your trouble and kind of bounce them off each other. Here's who the person could be. Here is the thing, or a thing, or one of a pile of things holding them back. It's not always going to be resolved. It's not always resolvable. The character also, shockingly, might not always want it resolved. Because think of your own life. You have flaws. You might want them gone, but do you understand who you might be without them? You've identified by it so long. You've dealt with it for so long. Who would you be without it? That space is a great character space to sit in. There's another question in chat. Could their trouble be the reason behind how they react to the catalyst, which leads them into Act Two? Sure, sure. That's not a bad way to go at all. Depending on what the trouble is, it might be difficult to get it to immediately link to the catalyst. But if you take somebody like a character who can't say no, it's a pretty broad, I'm making broad, expansive hands, a pretty broad idea in terms of who and what the trouble is. So then what we end up with is a situation where no matter what the specific movement into Act Two is, because the character struggles or fails to say no, they're propelled forward in story. Absolutely. Absolutely. On we go. Now we're going to go to part three. So we've looked at who the character is broadly. We've looked at a problem kind of holding them back or putting a flaw in their idealized perfection. Now we're going to talk about something more practical. Goals. What a character wants. Every character has goals. Everybody has goals. Everybody wants something. So the goal is a want the character has. And again, much like we talked about before, it does not have to be an arc. You do not have to make this a thing. You can. There is nothing wrong with making your goal your character arc. It's totally fine. Go ahead. But you don't have to. Your goal is just an overall thing that can be conceptual. It's the difference between saying, I want a sandwich. So our story is about making a sandwich versus something broad, like, I just want to matter to people. That can be applied, much like the trouble, much like the high concept, in a number of ways, in a number of situations. And it might not even be directly stated. It may, however, influence what the character does and how they do it over the course of this story, the next whatevers. The goal is an object or a concept or an outcome. I want to win the lottery. I want to live past 50. I want to, be famous. I want to always remember where I leave my keys. To find your character's goals, ask, what do they want? What would they want? Big things, little things. And why does that matter? So would the goals change, asks the question in chat, would the goals change as the story progresses? Or are you talking about a goal beyond the scope of story? I'm mostly talking about a goal beyond the scope of story. However, it's okay if the goal for your character is the goal of the story. For instance, if you have a rugged adventurer traveling a fantasy land, their goal might be to, reunite the fractured kingdoms. And that becomes also the goal of the story and the plot and all that. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But you could also take that same character who's got the plot of trying to, reunite the fractured kingdoms, but their character goal might be to, grow old and live peacefully on a farm with ducks. I don't know. I'm just trying to get you to potentially disconnect your character's goal from the plot of the book, because those are separate trajectories. They're separate vectors. They can be related. They can be parallel. They can be the same thing. I'm just trying to get you to see that they don't have to be. These are all different paths, all different tracks, and all different ways to take different things. And we do that by questioning, what does this person want? And why does it matter to them? Now, we've got a couple different kinds of goals. There's a lot, but we can boil it down to three different types. There's a personal goal, which is what the character wants for them. There's a collective goal, what I want for a great number of people. And a temporal goal, what I want for the future. You don't need three goals. These are just types of goals, ways to organize and think about things. Whose future? I don't know. You tell me. Depends on the character. Future for the character, future for the world, future for just my offspring. Doesn't matter. Could be anybody's. Revenge, you mentioned in chat, revenge could be a personal, could be collective, could be whatever. How is a temporal goal different from the first two? Because it could be really broad. So a personal goal might be, I want a sandwich. A collective goal could be, I want all of us to never be hungry again. A temporal goal is, I want a future where we have robots. It's a subtle distinction. You could argue that it doesn't need to be there. You could totally take that off and just have personal and collective goals. That's totally fine. Nothing wrong with that. There's no one single way to do any of this. What a goal does, whatever kind of goal it is, whatever label you want to stick to it, a goal puts something on the character's horizon and it creates a vector and it drives us forward. Can a goal be abstract? Asks Chad, or unknown to the character. Jack and Jane, for instance, are in a relationship, and Jane is searching for what she wants out of that relationship in order to pursue it. Sure, it can be absolutely abstract. And yes, it can be at the time unknown to the character. However, if you're going to go unknown, Derek, because you're the one asking the question, it would probably be a really good idea to have that character figure some dimension, some quantity of that goal out over the course of the story. Otherwise, you run the risk. I can't guarantee that you definitely will have this happen, but you run the risk that the character will feel a little aimless because there won't be any movement towards a goal. It'll just kind of feel like the character's doing stuff and we're not entirely sure why they're doing stuff. But if you figured some percentage of that goal, whether it's all or part, the character would at least have a vector. They'd be at least facing a certain way and going in a certain direction, if that makes sense. It's a good question. It's a really good question. How your character pursues those goals matters because there's no point in having a goal of any kind in any size in any way if they can't actually do anything. So we're going to go on to part number 4, the skills, which is what the character can do. And everybody can do something. It might not be great, but everybody can do something. This is the part of the discussion where people feel the most comfortable. So that's fine. I want you to be comfortable. I want you to get this. However, it's also my job to make you a little uncomfortable and get you to think. So we're going to talk about how characters do things. And I'm going to introduce you to the skill pyramid. Every character, I don't care who it is. I don't care what book you're thinking of, what movie you're about to say, people you've made up in your head, doesn't matter. Every character has one single absolute skill, maybe one or two at most, that they do absolutely the bestest, no matter what, every time. And it's something substantial and important. Let's make a distinction here. I'm not talking like characters are great at blinking. I'm talking like material things that matter, not superficial bullshit that you're just trying to throw in there to be like the gotcha guy in a conversation. I'm talking about what a character does best. There's probably one or two things that they do best that if they were in school and taking a test on it, they'd get an A. Yes. A doctor character would probably do surgery the best. Awesome. But you don't only want to think about it in terms of like job skills, because maybe what your character does best is be a friend to people or understand with empathy and compassion. Skills don't only have to be role playing game factors, right? They can be just something a character is good at, how well they do it. There's probably one at the top of the pyramid. So we'll call that what they do best. Could you do more than one? Sure. But remember, the more you get at the top of this pyramid, the less challenge you'll have for your character because they'll just be good at stuff. And the more perfect they are more frequently, the harder it's going to be for that reader to relate to the character and care about the story and keep those pages turning, which ideally and ultimately is our goal. So find the one or two things that our character does the best. We follow that with two or three things they do pretty well. There's still a chance of failure, but it's not a lot of chance. It, sure, it could go wrong in certain situations for certain reasons. But by and large, if they took a test in this, they'd get a B. They'd still do really well. They'd pass, be awesome. But there's still that growing risk now as we move down the pyramid of failure, the chance that it could go wrong. And I'm not talking like intentional failure, like they need to screw this up to move forward in their very complicated James Bond villain plan. I mean, more like there's just a chance it won't go right. There's two or three of these things at the B level. Coming down one more, there's two or three, although you could make a case that it's 3 to 5, but two or three is just an easy number to track on your fingers. Stuff they do okay at. When it comes up, they're okay. It works. It's not great. They're not the best in the world at it. They're not even the best in the area at it, but they do okay. Two or three things, anything. And the base of our period, the base of our pyramid, I should say, is all the all the everything else stuff they can do, and most definitely, and my favorite, the stuff they will fail at, things they will screw up, things that they could try but not do well. Can a negative quality be a skill? Asks chat. Like a character who invariably manages to feel guilty about things, or is a character who is masterfully depressed no matter what happens. A negative quality can be a skill. Absolutely. You could be very skilled at feeling guilty. You can be a master level depressed person. I do it every day, Maxwell. Yeah, you can absolutely turn a negative quality into a skill. There's no reason not to. You can certainly, I mean, a skill doesn't have to just be the action and opportunity of the character with their body. Like, oh, I can do this with my hands, or I can run with my feet, or I can drive the car, or I can, ride the horse or whatever. Those are skills, sure, absolutely. But, you know, being a friend to my friends, that's a skill. Have you seen some of my friends? It can be quite difficult to be their friend sometimes, in the same way that it can be difficult for them to be my friend. So, qualities of character, who they are, what they're into, what they're about, can absolutely be skilled and ranked like this. Now, I want to point out at this stage that there's no magic number of skills, right? It's not like we have to have 10 or we have to have 5 or we have to have whatever number. Doesn't matter. The majority of skills you're going to figure out the character having and to what degree they have it over the course of writing the story. Because you can't possibly map everything. We would be here all day for you to sit down and write out everything your character could do: blink, eat, drive, walk, clean, vacuum, scrub, horse, rope use, accounting, whatever. Should there be a reverse pyramid to this with their weaknesses? No. I'm going to say no. And I'm going to say no for two reasons. One, um, it wouldn't, the, it doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter is probably the easiest way to explain it, because if I know that I'm only mentioning 5 things, I'm just going to make numbers up. If I know I'm mentioning 5 things that I'm good at, I don't need to map out all the failures. I just know that if it's not one of these 5 things, chances are it won't go well. I don't need all the data in front of me in order to know as a writer what the right, I'm making an air quote, what the right thing to do is. Likewise, I'm going to say, no, you don't need to do that, because that sounds to me at this moment, recording this and talking to you, like the slippery slope to moving laterally in your writing. Like, I'm just going to come up with all the data. I'm going to do all the research. We're going to talk research tomorrow, but I'm going to do all this extra stuff that feels like I'm helping my writing, but you're not actually getting words on the page. And next thing you know, we're sliding further and further down this daydream day slope of like, I'm thinking and imagining my stuff, but I'm not actually like doing anything. What does it mean to move laterally? Okay, so we talk about writing and producing a book in two directions. We move towards, or vertically towards, our goal. I wrote words today. I finished a chapter. I accomplished something. I moved closer to my goal. I moved vertically, top down. Now, laterally is side to side. Side to side feels like I'm making progress, feels like I'm doing stuff. And I am taking up time and space, and I am producing words or research or whatever's, but I'm not actually ending up making forward progress. I'm doing a lot of extra stuff that feels like work, but it's not actually helping. I'm just eating up time and not getting where I want to go. This isn't actually helping me get closer to my goal. It's just lateral movement. I've sidestepped my path. That's what moving laterally means. So yeah, we want to try to avoid moving laterally a lot. It can't be helped sometimes. Sometimes it's just going to happen. But most of the time we want to talk about making forward progress as much as possible. It's not a race. We don't have to do it as quickly as possible, but we this is a marathon, not a sprint. So we got to get that, one foot in front of the other kind of movement to get closer to our goal. That's what I'm talking about. It's a good question. Now, Skills. Why do they matter? Couple reasons. First of all, nobody should be perfect at everything all the time. It's unrealistic and boring. Think about anybody you ever went to school with as a child who just seemed to be really good at everything, and how much the rest of us wanted to like shove them in a locker or otherwise just be irritated by them. Maybe you're related to one of those people. I am. It's incredibly irritating. They're just good at everything. It sucks. Nobody's good at everything all the time. We want to limit the number of perfect things, things they would get an A or a B at, because in those chances for failure, we get tension. Oh no, I have to do this thing and I'm not great at it. I wonder if I will succeed in this moment. That tension drives our character to try. Maybe they'll fail, maybe they'll succeed, and it keeps the reader reading. We want to read. We like that. Other note, failure is better than success. This is a hill I will die on. Failure is better for your story than success because success gets simple. They succeed. I do the hard thing. I shoot all the bad guys in the gunfight. No, not a scratch on me. Okay. Not very challenging. Didn't feel very tense. Part of that's going to come down to how you describe it on the page. Sure. But failure is more interesting. Oh no, I'm out of bullets. What happens next? Oh no, I'm not hitting this guy or this thing's eating all my best attacks. What do I do? Failure is going to be more interesting more often than not. Now, third point, you don't want to get into the habit of creating skills just because, oh no, I better do something here. Do not create a skill out of convenience or necessity. Wow, it would be really great if my character were like a world class helicopter pilot because I'm about to have a scene in a helicopter, and then poof, you turn your character into a helicopter pilot. Don't do that. Just don't do that. It's not great. The reader will see it and smell it coming a mile away. Don't do it. You can do better. Your choice matters here. We will talk tomorrow about how writing is the act of making decisions. And in skill development for your characters, we've got decisions galore to make. You don't always have to try and get it right or perfect. You can just see what happens. Can you have too much failure for your character? Asks Anna in chat. Should there be a certain amount of success? Well, certain amount, Anna, is an area that's a little nebulous because there's no magic number. But can you have too much failure? Yes. Too much failure is going to paralyze your story because the character will forever not make progress. Eventually, at some point, something has to go their way. Even if that something is, well, I guess they're going to die. They'll die correctly. But you can have too much failure. Absolutely. It's not the failure itself that is, oh, they failed at 15 things, boo hoo. It's failure situationally, it's failure contextually, it's failure consequentially. What happens next? But yeah, you can totally have too much in the same way that you can have too much success and your character doesn't really seem to be bothered by the plot. So we start questioning like, well, why is this the story? If the character's not really breaking a sweat and nothing seems really hard, why should I keep reading this book? That's a space you don't want to really position your reader in. Likewise, with too much failure, it's just exhausting. Think about all those phone calls or conversations you've had with somebody where they just want to tell you how bad everything is. How quickly do we want to get off the phone with that? How many times are we just oh, sighing a lot and rolling our eyes? Too much failure and too much success are absolutely possible. Try to avoid both. There's no magic number. It's sort of situational for the story. Ask yourself when you're writing it, okay, here's my character. This is the skill they're going to use. What do I do now? What could happen? If it goes well, here's what I'm thinking. If it goes poorly, here's what I'm thinking. And then do we modify or affect the degree by which it goes well? What if it went really well? What if it really, really sucked? It's a set of possible options. It's a crossroads. Just pick one. Pick one and then move. Make a decision and move forward. On we go. We could stop there. You could absolutely stop at those four things. And in fact, if we're writing red shirts, if we're writing very disposable characters who barely get name checked and then disappear from the story, like the person pouring coffee, or we reference, Tom, the guy who manages the store in town, you could just give them a high concept and a trouble and stop there. Maybe you give them a skill because they have a job to do and you stop there. Most Many of books, great and small, will stop there. I want to go the extra step. Here's that extra step that I take clients on that makes their characters, large and small, stand out. Item number 5 is the moral code a character has, what a character believes, because everybody believes in something. So we ask, what does our character believe in? And these are things like their concepts and their rules and their boundaries. How do they feel about fill in the blank? And then you just think of, like, how do they feel about bullies? How do they feel about, taxation? How do they feel about the person who leaves the empty milk container in the fridge? Find your X, whatever it is, whatever situational thing it is, whatever conceptual thing it is, and then ask them how they feel about it. How does my character feel about seeing the king passing, progressively more and more aggressive rules to create wealth inequality in my feudal story? And then a follow-up question is, if this is how they feel about it, why? Now, sometimes we spill into backstory for that. You shouldn't always, do not always run to backstory to explain stuff. You don't need to. The reader does not ask why. Why is that? As much as you think they might, or as much as anecdotal evidence on social media would lead you to suggest. Sometimes you don't have to explain everything. Again, like we talked about several slides ago, there's no quiz in your book. No one's going to be mad if you can't remember the exact reason or if you never bring it up. It might be interesting and exciting to you, but you don't need it. Sometimes that's just how the character feels. So why does whatever the situation lead them to feel the way that it does? And again, like we talked about with high concept and trouble, we're trying to create limits here. These are essentially positive things. Here is how a character feels. We know this stuff about them. But there are also limits. If I feel a certain way about bullying and injustice, then I know I don't feel 5 other ways about it. I just feel this one way. A character's moral code informs us as to how the character will use their skills to move towards whatever goal, situational or long term, they have. How is the character going to do or get there? Well, they're going to use their skills, and how they use their skills is informed by their moral code. Here's an example. If you have a character who does not kill, they're an absolute pacifist, then they will use their skills to avoid situations where they cause harm because they have a goal of, I will not harm another living thing. Moral code informs skills which shape the way characters progress to goals. Every character, I don't care who it is, believes in something. That doesn't have to translate or make its way to the page, but you can keep it in your head. Oh, this is, Kevin, the guy who pours coffee. We don't really need a moral code for Kevin other than Kevin doesn't want to fuck up his job. But yeah, maybe that's enough of a moral code. We don't need to get into the 15 other things Kevin feels about, like, you know, I don't know, blue socks or egalitarianism or something. No, Kevin's moral code is, I pour coffee, I do a good job. Done. That is Kevin's limit in the story. But giving these extra dimensions helps our characters feel less like people just doing things on a stage and more like real people. Because you, the person listening to this or watching this, you believe in stuff. Maybe it's a religion. Maybe it's a moral. Maybe it's just a rule that you follow, whatever it might be. Maybe it's a philosophy. I don't know. But you believe in stuff. Santa Claus, the Tooth Fairy, freedom. You believe in stuff. So do your characters. It adds that extra depth. A lot of people crafting characters are great at skills. They will make skills all day long, but they will really struggle to think past the plot when it comes to what a character thinks and feels. A moral code for a plot is easy. Well, I've got my hero. They've got to go do hero stuff. Okay. Well, how do they feel about other things? Because it might come up in the story. If our character is, I believe that there's, one leader and we need to defeat the evil monster at the end of the dungeon. Okay. Well, how do they feel about sharing food? How do they feel about this? How do they feel about that? Spend that extra time giving that thought. It's going to make your character feel more, more framed, more organized, which is in turn going to help your reader connect with them because it won't just be, here's my character's skills. This is what they're doing in the story. Okay, I'm done. We're adding facets. We're adding depth. Why a character does a thing matters, period. It matters. You don't always have to drive to backstory. In fact, I would challenge many of you to not overcomplicate the backstory. Sometimes backstory can just be simple. We're just trying to add some depth. It doesn't always need to be explained. It doesn't always need to be explained in these incredible flashbacks that sit around chapter 11 or 15. You can just have characters believe in stuff for reasons that you don't need to get into. Just like you. Why do you feel the way you feel about a thing? It's okay if you just shrug and go, I don't know. It's just how I was raised. Cool. Same rule applies to characters. Let's talk about some examples. We're going to do example 1, Indiana Jones, an action teacher. That's just goofy. That's what I thought. And you can break Indiana Jones down to hat whip and punch Nazis. Cool. I'm fine with that. So here's our example. Indiana Jones, high concept, adventurer with a heart. That's not the only high concept, but for the sake of us, for the moment, it's how we can define Indiana Jones. We take a look at any of his adventures, even the movies we don't like. We can define to some degree Indiana Jones as an adventurer with a heart. Now he's got trouble. We've got 2 here because somebody, I remember, I think it was Derek who asked earlier, can you have more than one? Sure, absolutely. His trouble we can summarize as Nazis and snakes. He hates them both. So we know if we put him in situations with Nazis and snakes, he's going to hate them. He's got goals. At least in the first movie where this is a screen cap from, we want to defeat the Nazis, get the Ark, and don't die. I want to make a note here to tell you, don't undervalue not dying as a goal. It could be a great motivator for characters. Now, Indiana Jones has skills. He's a history professor. He's got whips. He punches Nazis. Those are some pretty good skills. And his moral code, which grows over the course of at least the first 3 movies, we want to boil it down to it belongs in a museum. He wants to preserve things. He wants to hold on to things. Whether we want to get into the colonialness or the appropriativeness of that is a thing for a different day. But we can further boil down his moral code to you've got to fight for what's right. And those are enough directions. It's not perfect. It's not a comprehensive list. We didn't get into why his middle name is Walton. We didn't talk about, the random adventures he had as a child. We just gave enough of a framework to operate to move forward and tell our story. If we need to add to this list, hey, we're the writer. We can add to this all we want. Let's keep going. Let's look at Ellen Ripley, our alien survivor. Her high concept. She's a space survivor. We're only dealing with the first movie. We'll get into Ellen later on in the series as a different animal. For now, we're just looking at the first movie. Her high concept is space survivor. That's how she's geared. That's what she's going to do. Her main trouble in the story is the space patriarchy more than the alien, because she's just having a really bad day in the first movie. Moral code, says Derek, feels easily intertwinable with earlier subjects like high concept and goals. So does moral code mostly act as an explanation tool or modifier for other details? Yes, it totally is a modifier or explanation for other details. Absolutely it does, Derek. Good eye. Nice job spotting that. Maxwell asks, why doesn't the alien count as a trouble? Well, it can, and in later movies it does. I didn't count it as a trouble here because I picked a screen cap where the alien isn't on the frame. You can make the alien the trouble. Sure, absolutely. If we're lensing the story through the idea that Alien is only about the alien as opposed to the people dealing with the alien, sure, we can make the alien the trouble. That's totally fine. Nothing wrong with that. I chose to take it in a different direction because I want to keep the focus, just at least for this moment, on Ellen. But we could totally make it about anybody on the spaceship dealing with the alien. Sure. Absolutely. We can make it both. It could have been both. I just made it one. That's a John choice. Now, Ripley's goal here is pretty easy. Don't die. It's a big deal. And she spends the movie doing that. Her and the cat, the only two people that die or don't die. Everybody else, even Yaphet Kotto, gotta go. She's got skills, a lot of guns, and she can make some decisions. She has other skills. She's able to function the ship. She understands airlocks. She, has plans later on. She can drive a loader in the second movie. She can score baskets in subsequent films. So she's got skills. But for now, we're going to summarize this to guns and decision making because I only have so much room on the screen. And her moral code, at least for the first movies, it's either going to be me or the alien, and it's sure as shit not going to be me. So moral code, very simple. Prior to the alien, it's I just want to go home. And because of the alien coming in and being a situation that alters or affects things, our moral code changes slightly. You want to try and avoid constantly changing your character's moral code. You want to avoid making it convenient because it just seems less organized. We want it set up so that your moral code is a backbone that helps connect things, as Derek pointed out, to our high concept, to our skills, or to other elements of character. We just want this set up where the moral code is a stack of vertebra for things as opposed to anything else. Let's do one more example. We're going to use Killmonger from Black Panther. So here, our high concept is angry, air, and revolutionary. That's who Killmonger is. More so in the film than the comic books. The comic books flesh him out differently. That's fine. His primary trouble is he's ego driven. That's who he is at his heart. He's angry. He's the angry guy in the story. His goal, simple, to liberate Wakanda, ostensibly by him leading it. He's got skills. He's a military trained bad guy. So he's got guns, violence, strategy, and ambition. It's a pretty straightforward bad guy suite of stuff, but they're functionally useful skills. His moral code is actually really complex for Marvel, which is not necessarily a bad thing. He's one of the better Marvel villains because his moral code is driven around the idea of liberation without compromise by any means necessary. He wants power for himself, sure, but power for himself in service of this greater Wakandan militants. Frame the character because he's a bad guy. He's an antagonist. We can apply this to protagonists just as much as bad guys, just as much as antagonists, just as much as anybody else. It is a useful toolbox. So, as we get out of here, here's a recap. High concept, who or what a character can be ideally. What's their base sort of starting block? A trouble, what's the flaw underneath? What do they want? What are their goals? How do they attempt to achieve their goals situationally and otherwise? They have skills. And what do they believe? What's their moral code? What's their personal philosophy? And skills are not only for doing the plot. Don't only break out the skills that are critical to the plot. Lots of characters know lots of things to varying degrees. When in doubt, we want to consider our characters to be icebergs. What's in the story on the page is above the surface. There's a whole pile of iceberg underneath the surface that may or may not come up. It's okay if it doesn't. But we want to think about it in terms of we're only seeing some percentage of the iceberg. There's a whole lot driving the iceberg, maintaining its mass that we're not aware of. Depth matters. Multidimensionality matters. Characters are not perfect. They are three-dimensional. They have flaws and they are memorable. And of course, as I tell everybody all the time, whenever possible, you just do your best. It's okay. It's okay to make a mistake. It's okay to screw this up. It's okay to struggle with it. It's okay to rewrite it a billion times. It's totally fine. So, friends, any questions? about anything. We covered questions as we went, which was awesome. Have I written anything? Not in the last 20 years. No. I had some old stuff way back in the day in the early 2000s, but mostly no, I teach. If you're counting for like nonfiction and stuff, you're going to look at, I got a couple links. We can talk about, the Substack or the Patreon or things like that. So I write a lot of nonfiction about how to write and what to do and how to help you write better. But in terms of fiction, not my thing. It was not meant to be, despite it wanting to be my dream originally. I was just happier teaching rather than doing.
Can we ask
All right.
questions with voice too, or just with text?
Yeah,
So
man.
I have.
Yeah, yeah, whatever. Totally cool. Totally cool. What's up?
Oh, I was just a little curious about back to the skill pyramid. What divides a B grade or a C grade? Like they kind of, I'm sure there's obviously a difference, but I was curious about how exactly you would like define that.
It's the degree by which they could fail. Well, think about school with a grade, right? So a B is slightly less failure than a C, slightly greater proficiency, slightly greater dexterity or quality to it. The distinction is ultimately very variable and up to you. I will tell you, if you are thinking about your character and you are stumped as to the nature of a thing, find what's going to make the more interesting narrative choice, what's going to be cooler to have happen on the page, and go with it. Don't get bogged down in the like, is it a C or is it a B? No one cares. No one's going to know at the end of the day. Make the most interesting narrative choice because that's what's going to make it to the page. Good question. Really good question. Others?
Question from someone in the DMs. So she wants to know, first of all, how do you know if a character has too much going on?
How do I know if a character has too much going on? Okay. There's a couple different factors there. Now, part of this is going to come down to how you've written it on the page. That's going to be a factor because you could have a lot going on, but it'll be okay depending on how you've written. So I can't answer that part. However, if you, the writer, are having a lot of trouble in moving the character forward effectively, like you've always got a million things going on, and the character seems to be really slow to make progress towards their character arc or towards their plot. If the story feels like it's dragging, if the story has so many moving parts for any number of reasons, chances are, yes, your character has too much. Most of the time, too much looks like an overly dense story that is very slow to respond to characters taking action. Likewise, a story that is too thin, where there's not enough going on, has the characters making very few actions, but having like big giant results. I sneeze and then a whole country disappears into another dimension. We want to try and strike a sweet spot, find a better balance between those things by having the character take actions that move them forward to wherever they're going, but not have the consequences of those actions be so big that we end up taking too many steps too quickly. We want steps and consequences to sort of follow each other. There was a thing in chat I wanted to ask. Somebody asked, so would a C be like a coin flip, whereas a D is a failure? Yeah, Rebecca, you can handle C's as coin flips. It'll either go well or it won't. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, absolutely. Good question.
One more, please.
Anything else?
So there,
Yeah.
one more question. She's asking, I believe she has trouble sometimes with writing characters' attitude, but like not really the attitude, but the personality. Because she's saying she wants to know what's the difference between writing someone that is grumpy versus someone that's cold or maybe stirring, that kind of thing. She's still having a little bit of trouble differentiating that for a character.
Okay.
Well,
Okay.
okay.
Got it. Cool, cool, cool. Okay. character personality is a combination of two things. One, the current situation. Well, three things. One, the current situation they're in. So that's going to have an immediate impact on how they think and feel. Two, the second thing, are they in any interaction? There's a power dynamic. Somebody's got more power, more opportunity, more leverage, more something than somebody else. And that's going to influence how they act and react. And three, situationally, every character's got a goal. I talk to you, they talk to me. We each have a goal. I want to communicate to you in a way that you understand. You want to communicate to me in a way I understand. We each have a goal, and we each make an effort to resolve that goal. So when we're writing personality, we are thinking about the factors that affect character reaction along our path to our goal. So if I wanted to come across as cold, for instance, I would change the way I respond while still trying to serve my goal, because I'm always trying to get my goal. I'm always trying to exist in that power dynamic of, well, I'm the guy with knowledge. You're the person asking. So I've got more power, so I can flex that power to get done what I want to get done. And if I'm trying to be cold about it, I will sound a certain way. I will use certain words. I will not use certain words. I will change how my tone, I will change things, modify what I'm trying to do. So for writing a character's personality, think about the situation they're in where this personality comes out. Two, do they have the power in the situation where this personality is coming out, or are they trying to get some? And three, what's their goal? What are they trying to do in this moment where their personality is coming across? Why do they feel that way? And if they do feel that way, how is that way expressed? And then it just comes down to how you choose to write it. It's a good question. There was another question in chat. C would be a struggle, but might end up being okay, whereas a D would just be trouble in the making. Yes, that is correct. A D is a thing you could possibly do well, but more likely than not, there's gonna be a cost for that victory. Yeah, you could do it, but it's gonna be a real pain in the ass. Whereas C is, I can do it, and if I do it, it'll be okay, but it's still gonna be a little bit of hard work. Yeah, good questions. Good questions.
The
Anybody else?
is the slideshow cards going to be available on the recording? Or is that different?
Yeah, the slides. Yes, so there will be the audio recording, which is a thing. The slides, all the video for everything. I don't know if it catches the captions. I haven't checked that, but all the slides and everything will also be available. I was going to plunk that on YouTube. Yeah, so all that stuff. And I will take the audio and make a transcript that is mostly just the captions in a nice orderly form. I will have that done shortly, in fact.
Thank you so much.
Anything else? You're welcome. You're very welcome. I will be right back here tomorrow for more.
Yes, we are going to be very eager to see the next things we have more.
All right. So you guys you're very, very welcome, everybody. You guys, I should stop the recording, shouldn't I? I'm pressing the button